Picture this. You're settling into your seat on a totally packed, sold-out flight. You've just survived that exhausting boarding squeezing past knees and elbows, finally hunting down your seat. Every single spot is taken, the overhead bins are absolutely stuffed to the brim, and you can already hear that steady, muffled roar of the jet engines kicking on. You look around, and you see a true cross-section of humanity. You've got exhausted business travelers prepping for meetings, teenagers totally zoned out in their noise-canceling headphones, maybe some elderly couples excitedly chatting about their vacation. But as you scan those endless rows, you might realize one specific demographic is almost entirely missing from this floating village. So where are they?
Seriously, where are all the babies? Have you ever actually stopped to think about how incredibly rare it is to see infants on airplanes? Think back to your last few flights. Out of all those hundreds of people shuffling down the narrow aisle, you might have spotted one baby, or honestly, probably none at all. It kind of feels like this massive mystery hidden right in plain sight. I mean, we see babies everywhere else, right? At the grocery store, in restaurants, at the park. But the second we step onto a plane, they just seem to vanish. And the reason for this? Well, it's probably not what you're thinking. So in today's Explainer, we're going to dive deep into this vanishing infant mystery and uncover exactly why our skies seem so oddly, quietly baby-free.
Are babies actually banned?
Okay, let's start with the most obvious guess. If we aren't seeing them, could it be that they're just not allowed to be there? Let's take a quick look at the official airline policies. Is there some secret industry ban we don't know about? If you had to guess the standard rules for traveling with an infant, which of these would you pick? A, they're completely banned across the board. B, they're allowed but with some specific restrictions, or C, they're only allowed on really short domestic flights. I'll give you a second to lock in your guess.
Well, the correct answer is actually B. Now, what's really wild here is that this fact just deepens our whole mystery. It turns out most airlines absolutely welcome babies on board. Sure, the specific rules can kind of change depending on the airline or the country you're flying out of, but infants are generally permitted on almost all commercial flights. There's no secret aviation law banning them, and they aren't restricted to just quick regional hops. So if the airlines are perfectly happy to have them, why on earth aren't they?
Let's move on to Section 2, Science at 35,000 feet.
To really figure this out, we have to leave the rulebook behind and look at human biology. I want you to imagine boarding a flight holding a tiny, fragile baby. Let's walk through the actual science of what physically happens to the human body when you rocket miles up into the sky. When you board, you're at 0 feet. Everything feels totally normal, just like sitting on your couch at home. But the second takeoff begins, that plane rapidly climbs from 0 to 10,000 feet and eventually hits a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. During that incredibly fast climb, the physical environment inside that metal tube changes drastically. Now, for us adults, it's a subtle shift we barely even notice. But for a baby, it is a completely different and intensely uncomfortable story.
Absolute key to cracking this biological mystery is cabin pressure. See, as the airplane climbs higher into that thin, freezing atmosphere, the plane systems artificially pump in air to keep the pressure safe and breathable for us. But here's the catch. The pressure inside the cabin is still dropping quite a bit compared to what it was down on the ground, and this shift directly impacts the trapped air inside our own bodies, specifically those tiny little pockets of air deep inside our ears. You know that weird, muffled, full feeling you get in your head right as the plane takes off? That is literally the changing cabin pressure pushing against your ear. Now, when that pressure shifts, adults just instinctively know how to handle it, right? We barely even think about it. We chew a piece of gum, we swallow hard, or we force a big fake yawn. Those simple little actions open up a tiny passage in our ear called the eustachian tube that equalizes the pressure, and pop, our ears are comfortably back to normal. But an infant? A baby literally cannot intentionally adjust their ears. They have no idea how to swallow on command or fake a yawn to clear that building pressure. So what happens? They get a buildup of immense, sharp, and totally confusing discomfort in their tiny ears because the air is expanding and it has absolutely no.
And guys, this physical reality is exactly what leads to the crying. It is so absolutely crucial to remember this. That baby is not planning to ruin your flight. They don't even know they're at 35,000 feet. The crying is just a pure biological reaction to sudden pain and confusion. Actually, crying is pretty much the only way their little bodies can naturally try to force those ear tubes open to relieve that agonizing pressure. It's not some malicious plot to ruin your red-eye flight, and it for sure isn't bad parenting. It is literally just survival biology playing out in real time.
Which naturally brings us to Section 3, the parent's dilemma.
So, knowing the stark science of that infant ear pain leads us to the next big factor in this mystery: the parents. Before a baby even makes it through airport security, the parents have to make a massive, honestly terrifying choice. Because traveling with the baby is a logistical nightmare. It's like planning an Everest expedition just to visit grandma. Parents have to navigate this awful maze of booking highly specific, incredibly limited airline bassinets, just so the baby has a safe place to rest. They have to haul massive strollers, bulky car seats, exact amounts of formula, and a mountain of diapers. But you know what the absolute biggest roadblock is? The sheer paralyzing fear of public crying. The travel anxiety of being trapped in a metal tube in the sky, totally helpless while your baby screams in pain, surrounded by hundreds of glaring strangers. It's overwhelming. Honestly, it's enough to make many parents just cancel their trip entirely, or choose to drive for 3 days instead of flying for 3 hours. They voluntarily vanish from the skies just to protect their own comfort.
Now, here's where things get really crazy. Section 4. The big brain illusion.
Okay, so we know parents actively avoid flying, and we know babies experience severe physical discomfort when they do fly. That definitely explains why there are fewer babies on board. But it doesn't explain why it feels like there are absolutely none. For the final twist in this explainer, we have to look away from the airplane and look deep inside our own minds, because this is a real game changer. When a baby is on a flight and they are completely quiet, like maybe they're just sleeping soundly under a blanket or quietly drinking a bottle by the window, what happens? Your brain literally edits them out. They become completely invisible to you as you walk down the aisle. But a crying baby? A baby that screams in distress for 3 hours straight, there is no way you are forgetting that. Your brain records that stressful event with crystal clarity, completely burning it into your memory.
This brings us to a wildly fascinating psychological trick called the illusion of absence. Simply put, we only remember what explicitly demands our attention. Flying isn't inherently dangerous for healthy babies, it's just occasionally uncomfortable for them and highly stressful for the parents. But the real reason you think you never, ever see babies on airplanes, it's a massive attention bias. Think about it. The dozens of flights you've taken over the years with perfectly happy, silent, sleeping babies, they just didn't register in your long-term memory. They didn't trigger an emotional response, so your brain just tossed the information out. You only remember the alarm or the silence.
Which brings us to a final, thought-provoking question. As humans, we are literally hardwired to remember the disruption, not the peace. So, have you ever been on a flight with a continuously crying baby? Really think back to what happened. Did you feel intensely annoyed and frustrated, or did you maybe feel a wave of sympathy for those exhausted parents desperately trying to manage the harsh science of 35,000 feet? Next time you board a completely packed flight and settle into your seat, take a slightly closer look around the cabin. If you really pay attention, you just might spot a few of those invisible passengers sitting right in front of you.